I'd like to thank our sponsors, Blood Moon Box, a monthly subscription box service for period pads and tampons to help support all humans who have a cycle for that time of the month, and no need to run to a store to mix and match period supplies that don't cater to the entire ebbs and flows of your cycle. There are 2 box options based on your cycle, light and medium, and then heavy. And in addition to the period products, you'll also receive PMS herbal teas, a candle, and some other items for your time of the month. You can reserve a box by navigating to bloodmoonbox.com. And bloodmoonbox.com is on a mission to destigmatize the idea of period blood. At Blood Moon Box, they believe that it is the time to honor the enchanting magic within every person who has a cycle. So join us in embracing the magic of your cycle with Blood Moon Box. Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Today's episode is with Neil Markey, the co-founder and CEO of Beckley Retreats, a holistic well-being company that merges the science-backed benefits of psychedelics with supportive, contemplative practices that support holistic well-being. And at Beckley Retreats, Neil is dedicated to building a business that operates with the utmost integrity, both internally and across the many communities the business touches. I recently met Neil at a conference a couple weeks ago, and we had a really amazing conversation about the work that he's doing at Beckley Retreat. So I'm excited to welcome him to the show. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you for having me.
So, Neil, you are the co-founder of Beckley Retreats. I want to understand what inspired and led up to this, the founding of this type of retreat. And for those who are listening, maybe you could kick it off and talk to us a little bit more about the nature of the retreats.
Yeah, the retreats are, we do 11-week programs. So we do 4 weeks of digital preparation, a 5-night immersive experience with 2 psilocybin sessions, and then 6 weeks of digital follow-up. And we do programs in Jamaica and the Netherlands.
And why psilocybin? Why specifically did you focus on psilocybin?
Well, it's one of the most well-researched psychedelic compounds. There are risks, but it's generally very safe so long as you screen and you make sure the people don't have a pretty short list of indications that it shouldn't be using it. And there's not as many cultural sensitivities as some of the other compounds too. There's some pressure being put on some of the local resources in the ayahuasca community. So psilocybin just felt like a good place to start.
Okay, so I want to understand a little bit more about your journey into the alternative well-being practices. And you had mentioned, I think, at some point that you had faced some PTSD and maybe depression during your time at Columbia University. Can you talk to us about what was that journey like for you, and how did you find different well-being practices that eventually led to psilocybin?
Yes, I spent most of my 20s in the service. I was a captain in the U.S. Army and went to Iraq once and Afghanistan twice, and then got out and I was in grad school. And I was high functioning. I was at a really good school. I was getting job offers, but I was really struggling inside. I was kind of starting to isolate at one point, and I had tried quite a few different traditional approaches like SSRIs and different anti-anxiety medications, and I just didn't have a whole lot of positive benefit, or the side effects were worse than the original symptoms. I mean, pretty typical story to a lot of others. And then I got introduced to meditation, and that was what I needed. And I still am a big believer in meditation. And then I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to try a couple different psychedelic compounds, but in a structured setting with trained professionals. And to me, it seemed like those experiences were accelerating what I was trying to do with meditation. Like they were helping me get into the central nervous system and get to a deeper level. And they just, continue to be helpful to me to this day.
And can you talk to us a little bit about, what types of plant medicine were helpful and also like what does your meditation practice look like? For those listening, I think people are always get inspired by different meditation practices. So I'd love to know kind of, how your meditation practice started and also, how it's evolved to this point.
Yeah, I stumbled into this mindfulness for business leaders course, not really even knowing what I was going to, and then so that was kind of one of my first exposures to it when I was in grad school. And then I ended up getting into an MBSR, mindfulness based stress reduction course, which was developed by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. And I'm a big fan of it. It's very well clinically studied, and it's very approachable. Like, I wasn't really looking for spirituality at the time. I just wanted to feel better. And it's a really pragmatic approach. So I'm a big fan of it. And then um, I've had quite a few different psychedelic experiences over the last 11 years now. I mean, I would say some of the first ones were probably quite significant because they really kind of changed the path I was on, but all of them were special in their own way, and I feel like I've benefited in some way from all of those experiences.
And Neil, I guess for those listening, I'd love for you to share, exactly what that inner experience was like. If you feel comfortable, sharing maybe a
Yeah.
particular, journey that really maybe catalyzed a big decision in your life or shifted you in your inner world.
Yeah, my first one, I mean, I describe it, I was in fight or flight, and I think actually a lot of people, even not, even, non-veterans are in some state of fight or flight. The central nervous system is a bit overactive. It's a bit wound up, and mine was to a crisis point almost. And I describe it as like I was a bunch of rubber bands that were twisted and stretched to the point where some were like snapping, and it was almost like an immediate relax of that. Like, it was just like a whew, wow. Like, I wasn't walking around with my fists clenched, all the time anymore. And I had a couple close calls when I was overseas, and I always had a kind of a gut reaction when I would drive past traffic, even when I was back in the United States years later. And that got immediately better. My body was just not on guard. Like, that wasn't the kind of normal state for me anymore. Now, you can go back to your old ways, you know what I mean? It's not necessarily a one and done, because a lot of that patterning is quite deeply rooted, so it can take some effort, but you can get some almost immediate relief for a period of time.
How I'm also just curious, like, given maybe people that you serve with and who maybe did not go this path, like what have you noticed would be the differences in like lifestyle? And I'm also just curious, like what do you think your life may have been like had you not kind of moved forward on this path?
Yeah. There's a lot of guys and well, gals out there too that don't have super healthy relationships with alcohol because they're trying to numb or, you know, do something to ease the central nervous system. And alcohol actually does work really well, like while you're on it, but the toxicity and all the downside, um, you know, it's definitely not like a good option, And so there's a ton of drug use and stuff, unfortunately. And then I also see a lot of my peers just bury themselves in work, and they go to the next kind of high intensity work environment, and they just work themselves to death. And it's another kind of avoidance coping mechanism. And yeah, they kind of stuff things away and bury it down. You can either bring things to the surface and work through them and hope that they pass, or you can just kind of like stuff them away. But the problem with stuffing them away is they still leak through. They still show up. And so um, yeah, it's unfortunate. And a lot of the traditional approaches like SSRIs, I would say, they just kind of numb it. They don't necessarily get to the root. And but I really believe that these, for the right people, that these are can actually get to the root and, make more lasting change as opposed to just constantly numbing.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about maybe some of what you've seen, like the transformations at the retreat center, people coming in and leaving, and what their kind of shift has been, short term, long term. If you have maybe an anecdotal
Yeah.
story, that would be
I've
great.
got so many. It's so inspiring to see people make such significant shifts. But we do veteran programs from time to time with Imperial College London and this veteran nonprofit that are specifically for veterans with TBI, and those are always really special, close to my heart. And one guy came down, was quite closed off, really wasn't engaging much with the group. Like, you could just, I've seen this many times. You can just know where he's at. And he had his first session. And then that evening, we're all sitting around the dinner table and kind of trading stories. And his eyes were just like lit up. And he was just, his mannerisms, his whole kind of state of being, had shifted dramatically. And, he told the whole group, he's like, I always knew what the word compassion meant. He's like, I knew the definition of it. He's like, but I don't ever remember feeling compassion until I'm like sitting here now, you know? And it's like, wow, that's amazing. That his body was in a state where it had pushed some of those higher level functioning emotions off to the side because it was just worried about survival. And he'd been that way since he could remember. So it just opens up, and it's just it's really special. Another one was a couple that came down, an 80-year-old woman and an 84-year-old husband. They came down for her 80th birthday, and he was a Morgan Stanley banker, and they had lived in London, and they had 3 kids, and they had had a pretty beautiful and adventurous life, from the outside. And but they came through together, and afterwards, they said it was the most meaningful experience of their life. And now that couple, they had, drank alcohol, was kind of like a hobby for them. And now instead of drinking alcohol, they meditate together, and they're in a whole different community, and they just say they've never been happier, so it's really sweet. I've got a bunch more. I can tell you another one of a friend of mine, another veteran, but similar, he was a Green Beret officer, and then went to Wharton, and then was at McKinsey. So a high performer, and was quite skeptical of this work for sure, but I think just wanted to make some progress and knew what I was up to. And he ended up coming to one in the Netherlands. And I caught up with him the week he went home, and, I saw some shifts in him, big shifts during the program. And that week later, we caught up on the phone, and he was emotional. You could hear it in his voice, and I was like, "What are you noticing?" He's just like, "Man," he's like, "it's just been amazing." He had 2 kids, and his son was 4 years old, and he just said that it always really bothered him because his son would never come to him in the evening. He only wanted to be with his mom, and he'd bribe him, and he couldn't kind of connect with his son for whatever reason. And I mean, we don't understand the mechanics well, but I've seen enough of these to know that there's something going on here. There's something real here. But basically, that week he went home, his son just started coming to him at night, and his central nervous system's different, and we pick up on other people's states of being, and something shifted in him so dramatically that his son was more comfortable being around him. And what a gift, it's amazing. Now he's got to put in some work to kind of maintain that. And if you go back to just all your old bad habits and ways of being, then your central nervous system is going to revert. But there's this window that opens up where you can make some real change, and it's really special. And it can dramatically improve how you perceive yourself and your relationships, and just because kind of sense of well-being.
Amazing. Yeah, we can really, feel people's nervous systems. And so it's not even, it's like a nonverbal kind of way of communicating. So
Yeah.
I love that story. Amazing.
Yeah.
I can listen to stories all day.
Well, I've got one more that I love to tell, because it's just Just to me, it illustrates how much we need this work in the world. But we had a couple come down from Florida. They were retired. He was a former police officer. She was a teacher. They were quite conservative, like to the point where they were telling us some of their political positions in the run up to the course. And I'm like, okay, that I have no judgment, but they were very vocal. And they got down, they were sweet, but they had strong opinions on things and they wanted to tell people about them. And they came down to Jamaica, and then we had a woman from the UK was in, and, just complete other end of the political spectrum, and the two women were like oil and water from day one. And I was like, okay, here we go. Like, well, this is the work. Let's see how this goes. And then day two starts, and for the international listeners, they might not know this story super well, but there was this kind of scandal with Hillary Clinton in Benghazi. And anyway, it was just this kind of thing that was in our news cycle for a while. And the conservative woman wore this like Remember Benghazi t-shirt, which is kind of I don't know, just like an more extreme right type of thing to do. And she came out, with this t-shirt on, and I was like, oh my goodness, here we go. And so I, the other woman saw it, and it just like set her off, and so I pulled the woman aside and I said, do you mind just changing your shirt? I'm not making any judgments on it. It's just not probably the right place for this, and let's just make it easier on ourselves. And she was super receptive then. She did that. And these women just couldn't get along. Now they went through the rest of the week together, and now these women, they stay in touch. And, I don't think their political positions have necessarily changed at all, but they got around it. They were able to see the humanity in the other person and like develop a relationship. And it's really sweet, and they talk regularly, and this is a year later. And so it was a beautiful thing to watch,
Wow, that's amazing. That's really powerful. So, okay, that is probably what we all need more of in our lives right now. How big are the groups that you take through, and like what is the process like? Because I think for people who might be interested in perhaps going through some kind of experience like this, why, I believe you mentioned it's a number of days in a row. Why did you decide to do it that way? And like, yeah, can you just kind of tell me the genesis story of like the structure for this retreat, and also how your business partner, because I know she's very kind of well known, but love to bring her up. And
yeah, we got to talk about Amanda.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do 5 nights with 2 sessions, and we kind of iterated and tested some different approaches. I don't think, 1 session is enough, because generally people come in, it's their first time, they're a bit nervous, and they can't really kind of fully release into the experience in that first one. And so it's good to have 2 opportunities. And then in that usually the arc of the program is kind of everyone has met virtually, but then they meet in person. It's groups of 15 to 20 individuals. And, it's kind of human group dynamics at the beginning. Everybody's feeling each other out. And then, but after a couple days, everybody gets really close and comfortable together. And they go into the second session, like almost as a team, and, it's very different once that trust has been built and people are kind of supporting each other. It's really cool to watch. And part of the reason why I believe the group approach is the right approach for a lot of uses of these compounds. And, could you get more out of a third session, a couple days later? Probably. But then you start running up against them. Like, how do you get people away from their families and stuff for 9 or 10 days? It's tough, So I think we're getting the majority of the benefit, and most people leave with like very positive, meaningful experiences, and they can get back and try and incorporate it into their life. I think down the road we'll have longer form programs that are, lower cost and, less programming and kind of, more just kind of like co-living where people are just living close to the land and meditating daily and just being in nature. But we're not quite there yet.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And also, if you can mention your business partner Amanda and like who she is, how you guys
Yeah,
met. Yeah.
she's a legend. I mean, she's such a special woman. I just adore her and look up to her so much. She just turned 80 this year. She's been, experimenting with and researching psychedelics for her entire life, basically. And she started the Beckley Foundation in 1998. And the Beckley Foundation has really been one of the world's leading research nonprofits, and has been driving a lot of the studies showing some of the potential benefits. So it's because of her and some of the other leaders and some of the, for sure the indigenous communities that have kept the dream alive, and so, it's why we're able to have these conversations now, is because we do have research, and it's pretty clear that these should be further investigated. So the whole kind of industry owes her and some of her peers a lot of credit for us being able to, talk about this stuff pretty openly now. And she's just, it was never about money for her either, which I always just like really respect. She thought this work was good for the world, and she just refused to take no for an answer. And people thought that she was kind of nuts for a lot of her life because this was so taboo, but she just didn't quit. And now everybody's like, oh, well, she was right. And it's really sweet to see her kind of now starting to get a lot of recognition, and she deserves it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
amazing.
What's her full name again?
Amanda Fielding,
Amanda Field.
Feil. If you just Google Amanda Fielding, she'll come up. I mean, she's been in Forbes and The Economist and Rolling Stone, and she's a living legend. Her story has not been told well in the United States, but I think it's just a matter of time, because it's almost hard to believe. Like she's a British royalty. She lives in a castle. I mean, it's just like
Wow.
unbelievable.
Maybe we should have her on the podcast next.
Yeah. She's a character.
So, okay, so I want to dig into some of the research then. If you can share some of the research from the I guess the retreats, and then also the research that maybe Amanda's done. Like, what are some of the science-based benefits of psychedelics? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, it looks like, these high dose experiences put the brain, and likely central nervous system and body into more of a more neuroplastic or malleable state. So it kind of creates this potentiality. And so then you can kind of introduce new habits and new ways of thinking, you know? And it does seem to have some way of getting a bit, deeper than the thinking mind. Like talk therapy is great and I encourage it, but a lot of times it's just at that conscious level where a lot of history, trauma, it's stored in the body, and so if you're familiar, like with the book The Body Keeps the Score, a lot of that stuff's happening on a pretty deep level, and these compounds seem to have some way to allow things to surface, and then they can be addressed. um, some of there's tons of different research around these different compounds for clinical indications for, looks like it's pretty helpful for treatment resistant depression when compared to other treatment methods, PTSD. But then there's also research around just general well-being, so there's research around like this sense of awe, so people's ability to just see that sheer, miraculousness of their lives and just like really sit in gratitude and be able to be thankful for life. You give people these experiences, they feel that more, and that's really meaningful. There's studies that, a lot of this research is still emerging, so you got to build bigger bodies of data before you can say a lot of things conclusively, but it looks encouraging. But another one's around end of life, so most people in those final years have tremendous anxiety around the next phase. And it looks like if you give people a controlled psilocybin experience, that anxiety like literally goes away and people are able to, pass, peacefully. We had 2 stage 4 cancer patients down on a program this summer. I mean, that's not our normal guests. We don't do specific like palliative care programs, but they met the screening and made the decision to let them come. And they both expressed exactly that they were just, they were worried about what's next. And then you have these experiences and you just feel this interconnectedness of this existence we're in. And it just makes you feel okay about, the next phase. And I mean, it's just like such a gift. Some other interesting ones that, there's, a lot of the same benefits that you can see from a good dedicated meditation practice looks like you can accelerate or enhance with the proper use of psychedelics. So creativity in some ways is kind of getting out of our own way, right? Like where you think, sometimes you're just like really trying to figure something out or come up to some insight. And if you're just working hard at it, like it won't come to you. And as soon as you go for a walk or you just like get out of your own way, it presents itself. It looks like you can give people an ability to do that more freely, just like with meditation. So there's like these creativity potential benefits or kind of outside the box thinking benefits. There's a lot of potential benefits because it looks like it's really allowing the brain and likely body to connect in new and novel ways and kind of repair places where it's not communicating as well.
So, okay, so Neil, like, who are psychedelics not for? It sounds like there's so many benefits, but are there people that should not be taking? You said you had a screening, so that's why I asked.
Yeah, I think it's different people have different risk profiles, and so like our programs are non-clinical, and so we screen out, you know, clinical indications because ours are more for personal, professional, spiritual development. It's got to be people that are generally well, looking to become more empathetic and connected and, maybe make some change in their life. So, there's a certain demographic of people that make sense for our programs. And then there's the clinical application. So people that have treatment resistant depression or PTSD, I think that there could be group approaches for those indications, but you just need to have a whole nother level of infrastructure in place. And you need to make sure that there's more follow-on care, like in-person care. And so you can, I think, use psychedelics for people that have more severe indications. You just have to have a more robust and like thoughtful approach. And then there's the jury's out on, some of these kind of severe psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia and bipolar and multi-personality disorder. Right now, the consensus is that's probably it. That's really risky. And generally, those people are not recommended to do psychedelics. But there's some researchers out there that say, wait a minute, there could be something here. It's just you have to do it in a certain way, and it needs to be another level of kind of like thoughtfulness around it.
Fascinating. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like just the rigor of care and structure around it
Yeah,
obviously needs
yeah,
needs to change. So
yeah.
you also mentioned, Neil, in a kind of an earlier something I read that that you see no real divide between science and spirituality. And can you share a little bit more about what you mean by that in the context of psychedelics?
Yeah. Well, so I was a bit of a mathematician when I was younger, and so I've always been a bit of a seeker, I would say, because I think from a math or physics perspective, if you go deep enough, it's really hard to think that this is all just random chance. It's like impossible. And then if you gotta go below the atomic level in physics, I mean, stuff gets really strange. I mean, it looks like everything's connected to everything, and stuff happens that violates like our understanding of kind of, Newtonian physics. And it's weird. And I was like, what is this? And I had tried some different organized religion, and I was quite turned off by it. And I didn't really find an answer when I was growing up, but I knew there had to be something. To me, it's so clear that there's some type of intelligent design. I mean, it's like we are a walking miracle. Like if you run the odds on this thing, it's like, hitting the Powerball every day for, hundreds of years. Just, it's nuts. It's wild. And, and then you have a psychedelic experience. And I think it puts you kind of in direct connection with this thing. And, so my view of the world is that it looks like some type of field that has a bunch of energy in it. We can kind of we're starting to be able to measure this a bit more. And it looks like it has information in it. It's structured in a certain way. And you can see this in a lot of different kind of scientifically, verified experiments. And so we're part of this thing, and you can have a relationship with it if you live your life a certain way and practice certain things. And this is what a lot of the world's religions, I think, intuited into, and they ended up calling this thing God. But I don't think it matters what you call it, but you can orient towards it and you can kind of get into a better relationship with it. And so to me, there's like a really rational argument for there being some type of intelligent design and some type of energetic field. And I think if you look, from a physics perspective, it's pretty clear. And then if you give people these experiences, I think they can experience it and reach an understanding that's almost beyond the thinking mind. It's deeper than that. And so, yeah, I think that our tools are just starting to be able to verify some of this phenomena more. And so there's no real discrepancy. It's just, you have to kind of take the time to develop the understanding and have the experiences to be able to get it.
I love the way that you describe that you come into contact with this thing, this force, this field. And I love that because I think that the origin story of what the meaning of God is so, it's so different, based on who's telling it. But we can all sort of agree that there's this sort of thing that we're all connected to. And it's interesting. I think some people can feel it on their own. Some people have no direct experience and, maybe absolutely need this entry point to sort of facilitate that initial connection, the reconnection, if you will. So
Yeah.
I really love that. And I will say, like, I remember this, had a conversation with someone who, in which they were just a complete sort of atheist and aspiritual, I would say, completely. And I said, well, do you believe in math?
Yeah. It's so clear to me. And I think it's actually fascinating too. If you look across all the different world's religions and then you look at different indigenous traditions, there's more similarities than there is differences. Like a lot of the teachings are the same and a lot of the practices are the same. And so to me, they're all pointing at the same thing. It's just they've been warped by man, and like we have an ego, and we try and control people, and we want stuff, and control. So we warp stuff. But the consistency is unbelievable. And I just love this Buddhist saying, which is like, don't confuse the finger pointing at the moon for the moon. If you allow this field or this thing or God to be defined as the infinite, which is what I think it should be defined as, then anytime you try and describe it or box it in or name it, you're going to be wrong. And of course, if you put like some cultural lenses on it and, time, then it's going to get warped. And so we got to kind of take a step back and remember that the direct experience with this thing is not just through the mind. There is another level that's at work. Some people would say it's the quantum level or the spiritual realm. I think it's very, very, very real.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely love that. It's also interesting because we all have our own kind of filter and subjective experience of this thing, and so I think that is also where there seems to be a lot of even disagreements once you have agreed that there is this powerful source.
Yeah.
It's like then people want to always kind of personalize it and want
Right.
their version of their experience to have more meaning, or it's so that's also interesting, the fact that we can't describe it. But so also, Neil, I wanted to touch base on a quote that you had on the website that referenced Einstein, and I'd love for you to share the quote with our audience, and then also why it felt important enough to include on your website.
Yeah. I think there's a couple on there, but one of them is there's two ways to live your life.
Yes.
One is as if everything's a miracle, and the other is if nothing's a miracle. And yeah, to me, it's you either believe that this is kind of all like random chance, you know, or you believe that there's that there is some purpose, and that this is all happening for some reason. It's kind of one or the other. And to me, this is all, there's a design in it, and it's a miracle. Every moment that we're alive, the level of complexity involved, it's astonishing. So it is just a moment to moment miraculous experience. And it's good for us to just sit in awe of that. And you don't even necessarily need to figure it out all the time. It's just like being aware of it and sit in gratitude of having the wild experience of experiencing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I feel the same. Okay, so I know we're coming to time, Neil, and I still have so many more questions, but I wanted to focus on kind of looking back on your journey, because it's been such an interesting one, given how you got introduced to this work, and also who you partnered up with, and even just the lifestyle of being in kind of Jamaica and the Netherlands and in the States. What has kind of surprised you the most? When it could be about the retreat, it could be about psychedelics, humanity, sort of your perspective on your journey. What has surprised you the most?
What surprised me the most? Well, I feel like the whole world has changed in the last 2 years in terms of acceptance of this new, you know, ways of being and these compounds. I mean, it seemed wildly taboo to have these types of conversations 2 or 3 years ago. And now I've got, ex McKinsey partners and guys that are my dad's generation in their 80s that are like, we're coming down, I mean, so that's been an exciting shift. And I think the world needs it. There's risks, but I think that this is a good direction. And I've also just been surprised at how entrenched the kind of powers that be are in the, Western medical and mental health systems, and just how profit driven it is. And it's disgusting, I mean, the opioid epidemic, how many kids are on different, basically speed, or antidepressants. It's horrible, and it's all about money. You look at the incident rates for teens on all these different meds now. It's like, what are we doing? It's really frustrating. So I hope that we can keep trending in this direction, and teach people how to take better care of themselves. And um, yeah.
Yeah. Amen. Amen to that. So, Neil, who, has inspired you the most? It could be, by the way, be Amanda, but just curious, beyond your business partner, who else has kind of inspired you the most looking back on your journey? Or it could also be books that may have inspired you.
Yeah. I mean, Amanda has been super inspiring to me for sure. But, Rick Doblin with Maps, I mean, I love that guy. I mean, if you follow his story, it's incredible. He had a vision and then just executed this thing against all odds, and he's figuring it out. Maps is going to get MDMA approved, and no one thought that was possible. And he just carried this thing on his back for the last couple decades. I love him. Paul Stamets, I've gotten to spend some time with, and I just think he's amazing. He's arguably one of the world's leading mycologists, if not the, most renowned mycologist. And he was just like a self-taught, um, you know, guy that loved being in the woods and looking at mushrooms. And he actually developed the science. Like, they didn't have courses because no one understood it. So he went out and wrote the courses. And this is all just within the last, 30, 40 years. And on top of that, not only is he a complete genius and just figured this out for the world, he's a sweetheart. He just wants world peace, and he just does it from such a authentic and pure place. But he's also famous, and everybody he's had a lot of success, but he's still, when I see him, he gives me a hug and asks me how I'm doing, and just such a humble, brilliant man. It's he's awesome.
Oh, I love that. We're actually going to have Rick on the show very soon. So
Great. Yeah, he's a
very
legend.
Excited.
I hope they do this documentary on him that they've been talking about, because that is going to be a trip. I mean, he's a trip.
Oh, I hope so too. Neil. So, what do you want to tell our listeners about kind of their health and wellness and well-being? What's your main takeaway?
I think meditation is really important. It's foundational to me. It's kind of in a bucket of its own. It's the one act of not doing. And I think that most of us really need to practice that. And it takes a long time, but it's worth it. And I think that plants, if used in the right way, can accelerate that timeline. And then, nature matters. I mean, this is another place where, I think science is catching up, but, now you've got people that are quote unquote nature bathing and getting benefit. Yes. We're part of nature. We need to be in relationship with nature. You can measure the energetic exchange between us and when we're grounded. And there's all kinds of physiological things that happen in us when we're in nature, and we need nature, a lot of it, like water and food. And then, what you're working on matters. Sometimes I think we get caught up in just wanting to make a lot of money so we can have a lot of things. But if you're not working on something that your heart is in, it's going to be a tough road, right, and your body is going to keep trying to tell you in some way, shape, or form that you should be doing something else. And a lot of times we don't listen to that, but finding something that lights you up inside is really important to feeling your best.
I love that. Yes. What powerful message. And I just noticed your accent. Are you from Canada?
Oh, no, I've never heard that before. People think sometimes I'm from the South. I'm from Maryland, but I'm from a smaller town, and I think I have a little bit of a twang from time to time.
Oh, okay. Oh, awesome.
Words, yeah.
So Neil, are there any resources that you can point folks to in order to learn more about you, learn more about the retreat center?
Yeah. If you Google Beckley Retreats, will be the top listing. And yeah, there's lots of good information on there. You can kind of download a full program guide, and then we do twice weekly Q&As. And so it's just, me or someone on the team will lead it, and we'll give an overview of the program, and then people are just free to ask questions. And so both those ways work really well. Or just send us an email to welcome@Beckley Retreats, and we get back to people pretty quick.
Amazing. Neil, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome. I loved hearing your perspective.
I appreciate you.
Oh, and for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about psilocybin with Neil Markey, and you can tune into Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again. What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run a 5-week program at the Inner Knowing School for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals, a number of practical tools and frameworks for creating an intuition practice and for self-mastery. You can find more at theinnerknowingschool.com. I have a master's certification in intuition medicine, and I've condensed 10 plus years of experience and research navigating how to harness your energy and intuition in an easy to access live curated course. Now, as someone who's helped countless creatives, entrepreneurs, and many who are just plain stuck, open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I've seen this strategy transform people's inner states and external reality. And the best part is that you'll skyrocket your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly live to overcome your limiting beliefs and show you how to manage your energy instead of your time. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition based on some of the top tools and frameworks that I've developed. And you'll get access to guided meditations and visualizations not available anywhere else. This method is so effective that even if you don't have that much time, or if you think that you might not be ready, this will work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can check out what past clients had to say about the program. Wishing you all many blessings ahead.